Hello and welcome back to Crossroads of Cognizance. I'm your host, Dahlia Rose, along with my host here with me, Katrina Rasbold. We're here holding down the fort on the East Coast and the West Coast. We are your one-stop shop for trends, tips, and looking behind the kimono, peeking behind the kimono for what it's like to support others. And
Nothing pervy.
no, nothing at all. I mean, it's that personal. Like,
It is.
you get to see all the, look, we're supposed to be doing introductions. We've already started. I was talking to someone about energy work and just how intimate it really is, and
Mm-hmm.
how, if you're on the street and you're talking to somebody about energy or about their energy, it's not like, how's the weather?
Mm-mm.
And you can't just walk up to, well, you can, people do it, oh, your energy feels amazing. There's more to that, and so it's never a casual conversation. There's always an energetic, you mentioned vulnerability before the show, and
Mm-hmm.
when you bring up the topic, it is peeking behind the kimono, like that
It is.
person is naked and exposed.
It is. And, we've got, hey, how you doing? And then we've got that moment where somebody really sees you and says, hey, how are you doing? And there's a different level of intimacy and exchange there that happens. And, you know, I had a friend once that talked about a time she got thrown out of a metaphysical shop. And and the gal that had asked her to leave just said, I just don't like your energy. and and so sometimes we're emitting something that is or is not a good fit with the other people around us, and I don't think we often recognize the level to which our energy gets away from us.
Hmm.
And we are so used to ourselves and accustomed to our own energy that we don't stop to think that other people are reading interpretations of that energy, even like you said, on the street, on the subway, or in line at the bank, and maybe backing off a little bit because they feel overwhelmed because you're a lot, or maybe feeling like they just want to hug you. I had an experience. No, we've not introduced ourselves yet. If you're not our people, you don't know who the fuck we are, but we're going to talk anyway. I had an experience coming out of a burger joint last week, and it was just a day, let me tell you. um we had a tough time because we are very close to the California fire.
Okay.
And for a while, within the last week, it looked like it might come our direction. It got to 6 miles away from us.
Oh.
And for us, just a year after our house burned down with the California fire, it's a lot of feeling, it's a lot of emotion, a lot of triggering that happened. We were both very surprised by the level of PTSD that manifested from this experience. The air was thick with smoke. You could barely breathe. I had a constant headache. So there
Mm.
was a lot going on. Plus, we were getting ready for Sacramento Pagan Pride, which was a huge event. So we went to this burger joint in Placerville called The Habit. And it's just, burgers, fries. So we sat there, we ate. The dinner was okay. As Eric puts it, when a dinner is just average, he's like, oh, it'll make a turd. Okay. And and so we weren't thrilled as far as, okay, we ate. Our energy's been restored in a terrible way, but it's been restored. It wasn't a nurturing meal. It wasn't a delightful meal. It was just a meal. And we were leaving out, not unsatisfied, but just really baseline. I mean, super not vibing. We were just hanging on. And as we left, this couple, an elderly couple, was coming in. I say elderly, meaning they were like 10 years older than me. You know, I mean, she may or may not babysat me when I was little. I don't know. But they were super conservative looking, super Republican looking. She had on this T-shirt with the American flag on it, and I'm sure they got red hats in their closet. And there was just this. We live in a very conservative county. El Dorado
Right.
County is the conservative stronghold of California, and we were coming out, And I opened the door and kind of stood back to let her come in. And she looked like I just handed her the freaking Holy Grail, because she said, "Oh, thank you." And I said, "Oh, no problem at all. She goes, we have to do for each other, don't we?" And I just looked at her and I had this moment with her. And I said, "Yeah, yeah, we sure do." And she just started to tear up a little bit. And I said, "Oh, Mama, bring it here. Come here." And she came in and she just gave me the biggest hug, like in front of the burger joint. And I never saw this woman before in my life. And Eric said her husband was off to the side, like, "Oh, fuck, here we go again." And, but she was like, "Thank you. Thank you. I really needed that." And then we went on and it was done. And it was just this weird exchange. And so we don't always know how we're changing someone's day or how they think about a moment or a memory that they're making
Hmm.
with the energy that we're putting out there, even for people we maybe never ever would have met before or who wouldn't be in our social circles. So
Absolutely. And, taking it even deeper, maybe you had the same frequency as someone who meant something to her that doesn't,
oh yes, yes.
so it's a wild and complex journey. But this is a great, so here's the quick introduction. I do stuff on the East Coast at my shop, and Katrina
I do
does
stuff
stuff.
on the West Coast. Hi, I'm Katrina.
um, but Katrina had a really interesting experience. So part of that was the burger joint. But
Mm-hmm.
so how was the festival?
It was, it's weird. Okay, it's weird.
That's weird
I have
coming from
I
you.
have run festivals in Sacramento to varying degrees for the last 23 years. And I am the director of the Pangaea Festival, which is a really big festival we used to have before COVID. We're having it again in June.
Oh,
I
nice.
worked on I worked on the Sacramento Celtic Fairy Festival on the board of directors for many years. I did worked on Pagan Pride for a while, and then I've been through several different Pagan Pride directors that are the person in charge of the whole event. And this particular festival this year, I won't say it was an afterthought, but with COVID and everything that's been going on, people were kind of like, "Oh, do we want to do it? Do we not want to do it?" There wasn't a huge lead up to it. There was just this announcement, and I'm not on that board of directors. I'm just a vendor.
Okay.
But there was just this thing of, "Hey, we're having it. It's one day. It's on this date. Give us your money." And so we applied to be vendors. And this particular organization doesn't have a huge network of volunteers. And
Okay.
so you've got a few people working really hard to make a good event, and there just isn't enough bodies to go around. So we didn't get very much advertising. I would say it was probably a quarter of the traffic that we usually see on a
Hmm.
festival of that caliber. But we had a great time. Uh, our booth was poppin'.
Nice.
Um, Gladys and Debbie had their products at part of my booth, and Figui was there to help out, and Bram and Seth were there to help out. We had a lot of hands. I probably did less than I've done at any festival I've ever worked at. I just sort of sat back in my little deck chair and just watched it all unfold. We made a great, I mean, it was definitely worth closing the store for 3 days because we had to close in order to pack everything up to take it and get set up
Hmm.
down there. We had to
Right.
close for the day of. And then, of course, the day after, all of our stuff is in bins. So we couldn't really have the shop open. So I came back on Monday and set everything up again. So we lost 3 days of business, but made more money than we would have made in that 3 days. And
Very cool.
Eric bought this mother drum from the drum maker extraordinaire. I mean, this guy's drums, he's been a friend of ours for, a decade or so, and he is the drum maker. His name is
Ooh.
Don Schultz. He owns the Different Drum, and he teaches drum making classes. And he had this mother drum there, and literally this thing is like giant. It's a giant freestanding drum. And I looked at it when I came in. I said, "Oh, Don, that's that's nice. And he said, it was bleached buffalo hide. And he said, if I don't sell it, I'm keeping it. I like that drum so much. I'm keeping it. And I was like, yeah, buddy, watch what happens at the end of this festival. And sure enough, this is so manipulative of me. We were coming off of, like I said, this horrible, tense time where we were just wrecked over this fire and just not sleeping. And we're just doing this. I mean, vibrating from the trauma.
Wow.
And so when Eric came to me probably around noon and said, look, I know it's a 1-day festival. I know we've got 3 carloads of stuff to take from here to the shop. Are you okay to drive? I was like, get in that VFW bar, my friend. We're going to get that drum. And so, and so he went in the bar, and his friend Josh came down, who's his very, 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 very best friend. Gladys makes jokes about them finger combing each other's hair. I mean, and so they're having a great time. Eric is the best drunk ever. He just loves everybody. There's so much love that exudes out of Eric when he's drinking. And so I watched it, and I was talking to Debbie and Gladys and Nelton. I was like, you watch Eric. He's going to Don's, and he goes over there, starts talking to Don and everything. I asked Don if he can play the mother drum. He starts playing the mother drum. Sure enough, all these people start coming around, and they're drumming with him. There's this whole jam session. It's really beautiful. And I'm like, y'all watch, he's going to buy my drum. And so we're sitting there, and sure enough, I'm like, look, because we were maybe like 4 booths down so we could see. I'm like, look, and here comes that Discover card. And I was like, yes, yes. And so that drum went home with me. A good time was had by all.
Nice.
So to answer your question in a very long way, yes, we had a marvelous time at festival.
That's fantastic. And it seems like, maybe that the business part was great, but it seems like you were really there to bring
it was
home
for me. It was totally for me.
A new child.
Yeah. Yeah. There was, so basically what it was is we had a good time at the festival, and the afterthought was we ran a business. So. And it was really great to see people we hadn't seen for a long time and reconnect, because they're kind of, they're in a little bit, it's an hour drive to our shop. And so not everybody makes it up, especially people that don't travel very much, or are homebound, but they can get around Sacramento. So it was really cool to see everybody and reconnect. And we just had a wonderful time. I did an elders panel, which was fun. And it turns out that all the elders on the panel were people I knew. So we were talking about, being in the Sacramento pagan community for 20, 25 years and how it's changed. And we had a room full of people. It was really great. It was a nice time.
So one of the poignant changes you noted before the show, which was?
So we have, and Dahlia can attest to this, retail for paganism, witchcraft, healing, conjure, stones, crystals, etc. It all works in cycles.
Yes.
And so things that are really hot at one point are the stone around your waist, sometimes, or around your neck, sometimes literally 6 months later. You never know what trends are going to come up. And honestly, TikTok has been driving a lot of the trends lately. I mean, it has become a force.
Right.
And so the Moldavite craze, the Tektite craze, carnelian was really intense for a while there. It all comes from TikTok, and that has become the influencer lately. And I actually was going to have a TikTok channel, and my daughter told me I basically can't handle it. She said, Mom, you're not thick-skinned enough for TikTok. You need to just back away from the talk. Ooh. And so she kind of talk blocked me there. And so I'm not on TikTok. I maybe at some point when I get clearance from, the hires up, but she was like, nope, don't do that. And so that drives it, that's what gets people interested. And the trend that I saw is that we had not done any festivals at all since pre-COVID. So September of 2019 was our last festival. Okay. So that's 2.5 years or more. And at that time, hoodoo and conjure were the prevailing energy. There was a
Okay.
huge push to all things hoodoo and all things conjure. And so we brought lots of washes, lots of dirts, lots of curios and things like that to the festival. And so, yeah, there was a huge, huge conjure push. So we did bring those things this time. But we brought a lot of it. We brought our whole store, basically. We brought a ton of stuff. We had a huge, huge booth, and the biggest booth there, and the most stocked booth there. But this time it wasn't about hoodoo and conjure. It was
Interesting.
more about new age things. And our books, we took our books and our tarot decks actually in bin after bin after bin. And those were, 20% off and the retail, and people were just all over them. It was really wonderful to see. We sold a lot of sage. We sold a lot of some jewelry and just incense for days. The incense just got cleaned out. The sprays went
Wow.
really well. So it was more new age than conjure. People were not, interestingly enough, looking for what I would call solution based magic. They
Okay.
they were looking at what's going to make me feel good. How am I pampering myself? How am I? Let me get that new tarot deck I've been wanting. Let me get the incense that's going to
Mm.
make me feel sacred. Let me get the spray that's going to make me feel awake and alive, and the sage that's going to clean me up. They weren't looking for what they were before, which was let me fix this relationship. Let me get a new car. Let me get some prosperity. Let me get this other job. I didn't hear anything at all about that. I just heard things about particular ways people want to feel. And that was fascinating to me because in the past, and I even put this in my books, um, when we are in times of distress, that's when hoodoo and conjure become very, very popular.
Okay.
We had our phase where Wicca was extremely popular and was the prevailing magical process that everybody talked about throughout the 80s and the 90s and even into the 2000s. Wicca was king. Wicca was everything. To the point that Wicca became equated with witchcraft when they're not the same. Wicca is witchcraft, but it's only a tiny portion of the huge spectrum of all that's witchcraft. And yet, because of a lot of really clever marketing, Wicca became synonymous with witchcraft.
Yes.
And so Wicca's wonderful. I love Wicca, but it celebrates ceremony. It celebrates the nature. It celebrates the turning of the seasons. And that happens in times of prosperity.
Hmm.
That happens, the celebratory aspects of magic come into play when people are affluent and when they're feeling safe and confident, when they need to pay their light bill, when they need to fix their relationship. That goes into hoodoo. That goes into hands-on folk magic that's going to get shit done. Wicca isn't as much about get shit done. Wicca is about celebrating and honoring the god and goddess and the seasonal turns. And so we really see these phases of how magic is expressed by people and what's predominant. And right now, it's about using energetic tools to feel amazing. And I loved that. I thought that was wonderful.
It's interesting to me the distinction you made about Wicca being generally like in times of prosperity, because I don't know about you, but it doesn't feel like a prosperous time.
It
And
doesn't.
and so to see that come up is, I think, you know, I mean, people have been promoting self-care for years now, boundaries for years now, and now we're getting to see sort of an active participation in that in terms of the healing community, which is
I
really beautiful.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
It
no, no,
is.
that was.
It's beautiful. I think people are wounded is what it is. And I
Mhm.
think that their spirit is wounded beyond their financial status or their feeling of emergency. I think they've gotten so burned into the feeling of fight or flight and emergency that it has become a way of life
Hmm.
and that they don't have a distinction on what feels good. And a lot of that is economical, the way that I mean, my son is 23 years old. It's rare because he lives alone. in a little studio apartment, and he had to fight hard to get to where he could do that.
Mm.
And so most people out here in California, I don't know how it is in the rest of the country, but most people who are young are cohabitating. I mean, you will find 3, 4 different people sharing an apartment, sharing a house, because they can't afford to have housing unless they have roommates that are helping them offset the cost of it.
Yep.
So we have this generation of young people, and whether we want to believe it or not, the young people are the energy that puts the most influence out there into these cycles. And their experience right now is, I don't want to say one of misery, but they're dejected. They're saying, I don't know how my life is going to move forward. I just, it doesn't feel like the American dream is something doable anymore. It doesn't feel like I can be successful. It doesn't feel like I can ever get out of this trap of having to rely on other people in order to have some sense of perceived independence and certainty. And so I think that that's where the wound comes from.
Absolutely.
And
And
people were terrible to each other during this election and during this um, pandemic experience, and so they can't trust each other to be kind.
I can definitely attest to that trend, having seen it, being part of that generation, technically speaking, although I feel like a Gen Xer, I'm not. Um, uh, it seems to me like that self care piece is the only opportunity that they have to regain a sense of control,
Sovereignty, yeah.
achievement. Yeah, I mean, there's so much fewer opportunities available, and it's interesting to me because one of the predominant arguments is that people are just complaining and they're lazy and they could do more, and it's really not the case.
They're
And
fatigued.
yeah,
Maybe they can't do more. And they had a time where, I don't want to say they got to stay home because not everybody wanted to stay home, but they had a time of isolation and they had a time of helplessness where they literally, I mean, think of how many of our young people were in the restaurant business.
yeah,
And so many restaurants went under or were not bringing on as many of the wait staff because we're seeing everybody outside. And so all of these people end up being without income unless they qualified for EDD and that pandemic supplement. And so they reached a place of, hopelessness becomes even more prevalent. And if they got sick, it could be even worse.
right,
So there was just a lot going on. It's been a brutal few years. And during that time, these were people that graduated and couldn't walk their graduation walk. It's all done virtually. They don't get any of their rites of passages. We're not even having funerals and weddings face to face for a couple of years there. And so everybody just feels out of step and they feel like they can't make things happen. It's an impotent feeling. And
right,
these are not kids that have just been sitting home playing World of Warcraft all day long. I mean, these are kids that have just said, "Look, I put all my energy into it. I don't have anything left to give. I'm just going to lay down and die. I'm just, you know, over it."
absolutely. And so this brings us to another interesting thing that I think, besides the self care piece. So on the one hand, we have folks really trying to initiate some, like you said, sovereignty in their life. Like, hey, you know what? I can't control the world around me, but I can make myself feel comfortable. And you brought up another interesting topic when we were talking about the show, which is emergency magic. Now, I've been known to say that there's no such thing as an emergency healing session, because at that point, it's always just a healing session. We're either
Mm-hmm.
doing it retroactively or we're doing it right in the middle. I have very few people. I have a few people, but very few that will come to me preemptively. Hey, I just want to make sure I'm good for blah blah blah. And recognizing there are differences between energy and magic, sometimes there aren't. And so I really wanted to hear from you, like what classifies an emergency or emergency magic?
I love that phrase, coming to you preemptively. I thought that was like a unicorn where people talk about that, but they don't actually ever see that client. People come to me for work when the ship is going down.
Oh,
We're sinking and you need to fix it. And, they just start throwing money at me to fix it. And yay, but job security. But I like to be very clear with expectations for my clients. And
mm,
when they come to me, when all of this force, all of this energy is pushing them down the drain, it's much harder for me to push back. It's much harder for me to stop that train that's barreling towards them. And I love that idea of coming to you preemptively. If people would come to me when they know that they have a court date and the odds are stacked against them, and that court date is 2 months out, that gives me time to work. That gives me lots of room to push and push and push energy toward a favorable outcome. But lately, especially, I've had a lot of people coming to me saying, I have a court date tomorrow. I need you to fix this right now.
yeah.
I just freaking
No,
got here.
no room to work.
Right? And I have a schedule. What if I've got 6 people ahead of them? I've only
So
got
they're
so many
expecting.
hours in a day, but you need me to drop everything I'm doing right now because you're having an emergency. Let me know ahead of time so we can work on this. And most magic is not a one candle, one off thing, especially on something as big as we need to influence a jury, we need to influence a judge, we need to influence a prosecuting attorney, we need to influence the person who is bringing action against you or
Mm,
your baby daddy or whatever it might be. And that takes time and it takes a lot of energy. And so we have to push and push and push to get to the point that we can get you the most favorable outcome. Even then, for instance, using the court case, the most favorable outcome still might not be what you want to have happen.
right.
It might just be the best outcome you can get under those circumstances. And, not everybody who comes to me about things like that is being honest with me and
Mm.
truthful. And not everybody who comes to me about things like that is innocent. And so, it's like they say, the jail is full of innocent people.
I remember you mentioning that, like, before you light that justice candle, make sure that you are in the right, because
That's right. That's right.
it's literally designed to bring justice,
It
not
is.
necessarily, which may not be a favorable outcome for
That's
you.
absolutely true. Absolutely true. And so for emergency magic, I get that stuff happens that you don't foresee coming. Hey, my car got totaled yesterday. I've got to get to work tomorrow.
Mm,
I'm going to need some help, bringing some transportation or some solutions in. And with emergency magic, which a friend of mine from Texas named Lee McMahon, I love this woman, used to call it rut now magic. And I was like, rut now magic? What's rut now magic? She goes, when you need it right now. and and so, sometimes you do have something where you need that to happen right now and you didn't know about it before. You didn't know it was a problem before. It doesn't change that you need an energetic push. And so, yes, we can drop everything and get on this, but the chances of success with so little time to push the energy isn't as good. So
so
we just put as much into it as we can.
it sounds like there's an opportunity here to loosely calculate, like, the more people involved, the more time is needed.
Both ways,
Okay.
sort of. So the more people who are involved that we have to influence, and the further they are away from the choice we want them to make, those are big factors.
Okay.
But the other side of it is the more people we have involved who are sending energy toward the solution, the better it's going to be.
Interesting.
So let's say that if you've got me working on it, you've got one person sending energy toward that outcome that you want. If you've got your whole witchy coven working on it and you've got, a dozen people pushing energy toward it, all with the same outcome in mind, you're going to get a stronger effect. So the number of people has a huge influence on the outcome, whether they're working for you or they are the force that you're working to influence.
Like a prayer circle.
Yep, that's why they work. And it's really Newtonian principles of energy conservation. It really comes back to 8th grade science. So if you've got what you would perceive as a movable or an immovable object, the amount of force you're able to exert on that object will determine how fast it's going to move. And if you've got 9 or 10 people putting energy toward pushing that object, it's going to be a lot different than if you got one person pushing that object.
100%.
And then you've got the resistance, which is if you're pushing that object, how smooth is the floor? If you got a nice smooth floor, it's going to fly. If you've got splinters and uneven boards, it's going to take longer. That's my metaphor for today.
So, okay. So emergency magic is a thing. And maybe I'm cynical. Emergency healings, emergency energy work, it is a thing as well. And I usually just sort of say those things as far as I'm concerned. Like I am not the paramedics you call. Like there are other people you call for emergency work.
Well, but also emergency healing is very different than emergency spell work.
Okay.
With emergency spell work, 99% of the time, the person is wanting you to influence energies and situations outside of themselves.
Versus the internal.
Correct.
Or the oppressive.
That's your healing there. So that's a whole other thing, is influencing you. If all of my emergency people just would work toward healing and influence themselves, I wouldn't need to do emergency magic.
Fair point.
So it is a different process, and you're absolutely correct that when it comes to healing, not only is there no emergency, but there's no timeline. Now, last night, one of my dear friends messaged me and said, I just found out our 22-year-old granddaughter was killed in a car accident. That's an emergency, and it's an emergency healing because I want to get comfort to her right away. I want to hold space for the granddaughter's spirit to ascend in a healthy and safe way. And that's an emergency healing. That's what I think of when I think of emergency healing, is this trauma has happened and we need healing energy. On 9/11, my coven got together and did some web weaving for some of the outcomes we were looking for that. So there are external situations that happen that necessitate emergency energy healing work. But when it comes to your personal healing that isn't affected by a huge trauma that just happened,
right,
there's no timeline, there's no emergency. It's just you are where you are.
And there are other options. One of the other trends that is big now is like this absolute distrust in the medical community, and I get it, but there are still some good practitioners out there in the medical community, therapists, counselors, otherwise, that can do a better job of supporting you in that emergent moment than having a Reiki session or what have you.
I think it really has to do with, what are your objectives?
Yeah.
What are you looking to do right now? And then deciding who's best going to meet those objectives. If you're looking to manage your borderline personality disorder, I am not your girl. If you're wanting to, hold space for the fact that your partner killed themselves, that could be both types of healing that's
Right.
needed. So you never know what's going to best serve a person. You just want to make sure that you can give them the best you've got and then move them on to other solutions if that becomes necessary.
Absolutely.
Yes, Jim and AJ, it's your time to get brushed up. But I'll be doing that once the store closes too, so you don't have to be scared.
Those maintenance Olympias. There, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, when you think about it, when you are doing maintenance energy work, energetic support, it makes those healing crises a lot smoother. I won't say easier,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
but
it really
smooth.
does.
Maybe it is that you'll get your insight a little faster because there's nothing in the way, or at least
Mm-hmm.
not nothing, but those external forces. Because I feel like when I'm talking to people about limpias or healing, I'm like, we're doing a lot of like dealing with a lot of external energy when we're doing limpias. And since I've worked with you, Katrina, and had you do limpias for me, a lot of times the fog clears, and I'll be thinking like, oh, I'm just having, maybe I didn't eat,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe I forgot to take my vitamins or something like that, and then I'll reach out to you, and you're like, maybe I should do Olympia for you, and then you'll do it, and I'm like, whoa, I had no idea the sun was out, you
Oh,
know.
same here with all of y'all when you work for me. And Jim is kind of speaking of unicorns, he's a different one because for about 6 or 7 months, we called him Mr. Rogers because his eggs look like this. I just can't even explain it. It's just a little round yolk sitting in a glass of clear water. Like, dude, do you even know anybody? Do you? Because his eggs would be so clear and clean, which is interesting because AJ, his partner, we literally call her the Hispanic hurricane because this girl is a whirlwind, man. She's the Tasmanian devil. There is so much just going on. She's amazing. She's a force of nature. And I just picture old Jim just sitting back, just watching it all happen.
In awe.
Yes, yes. They're such an interesting pair because again, his egg is just, it's just still. And
And
so he's on our watch quite a bit, which is at the Crossroads Hour. And we'll get these readings like, everything's going to be fine, Jim. Don't worry, Jim. It's all good, Jim.
and I think it's worth the audience knowing how rare it is to have like an egg in a clean jar. I mean,
Yeah. Especially if you've never had a cleansing before. We collect things all through our lives, and it's like that ominous closet that you just keep throwing shit into. That stuff isn't going to go away. You know, you keep collecting stuff.
you open it slightly and then you gotta like jimmy it shut.
Yes, exactly that. And so when I go in there to clean out a person for the first time, it's like, you're coming to me, you're 50 years old, never got your teeth cleaned. It's everywhere. And so usually it's this insane one for the first one, and then it just gets better or it, stays good after that. But old Jim Fordyce didn't play that game. His was just super clean.
That's wild. It's absolutely
Yeah.
wild. And I think it's worth having a small conversation about karma, because I think a lot of people try to assign like, oh, he must be all of these things, he must do these practices, and
Oh,
um
shut up. No, no, no. I
right.
don't, not you personally. I don't well, I'm kind of an odd bird where that's concerned. I don't believe, and this is my own belief, I don't ask anybody to share it. I believe we are responsible for and accountable for the outcomes of the choices we make in this life.
Okay.
I don't believe that transfers life to life. I believe that growth accumulates throughout
Hmm,
multiple lives. But I don't believe we're accountable for something or choices that we made 2 or 3 lifetimes ago or even last lifetime. I think we have lessons to learn each time.
for sure.
But I don't think that if you're having a particularly challenging life, that it's because you did something wrong in that last life. And if you have a particularly blessed life, I don't necessarily think it's because you did something right. I think
Hmm.
you might have just you know, been squoze out of a particularly affluent vagina. I don't know. But, I think that we have our birth experience and our growth experience as we're getting older. And then as we make choices, it's cause and effect. Our entire lives are a choose your own adventure book.
Yeah.
And I do believe that things that happen to us, when we're, 2-3 years ago, unlock something that manifests today. But I don't think that it's past life. And when we talk about karma, I believe that that all plays out in this lifetime. So I don't know if I'm the right person to even comment on that, because I am fierce about holding people accountable. When
Well,
we
and
are when we're accountable, we're empowered.
this is that you are a great person to have a conversation about, because this is creating two points of discussion, because there are people out there that don't believe in karma, and they're like, I don't get it, like, why does this keep getting brought up? And you brought up a great point. We need to be held accountable. um for me, that karma piece is the accountability slightly, because you're saying, okay, well, if I keep having this happen,
Mm-hmm.
I need to stop the cycle.
Right.
And karma, I guess, in my practice, becomes a point to say, like, hey, you keep doing this, so
Mm-hmm.
how do we end this cycle? And
Mm-hmm.
but just to say of Jim, um he is probably a very normal, as
Mm-hmm.
normal can be, individual, without all of the extra practices. He probably doesn't smudge every day and bathe in the most holy
Mm-hmm.
prayed over Himalayan salt, and still manages to have the circumstance of the egg come out the way it does,
Mm-hmm.
versus somebody like I know when Katrina's done limpias on me, she's like, girl,
Yeah.
what the hell?
Regarding Jim, I'll say I don't know Jim personally. I know Jim by having done 100 Olympias on him and
that's
communicating online. I've not
that's
met.
knowing enough, isn't it?
I think so. But my impression is that a person that has eggs that looks like this is a person that was conditioned from childhood to not become ruffled by the experience another person is having around you,
Interesting.
and to let that be their experience and to hold space for them and to honor them without taking that energy on themselves. And that's what I don't see it as I smudge every day. I don't see it as I squirt myself with this spray or that spray, which is helpful if you are not this kind of person. But I think some people are just less susceptible and have better coping tools for when it comes to being around intense energies of other people.
So, meaning that there's an opportunity for that stuff to slide off, because we're not saying it doesn't happen to
Correct.
Jim,
Right.
it just doesn't cling to
What
him.
is Jim let in?
Right.
I'm going to go all scientific here. I taught childbirth classes for 20 years, and there's a membrane between the placenta and the uterus
Okay.
when the mom is pregnant. It's called a semi-permeable membrane, and it means that the oxygen and the nutrients can exchange into the bloodstream from the bloodstream of the mother to the bloodstream of the baby through the placenta, but the cells cannot. The cells are too big, but what the cargo that the cells carry is small enough to get through, and that's a perfect arrangement. It works great. So the mother and baby's bloodstreams don't mix until the baby's born and the placenta separates and that membrane tears.
Right.
So, and this is a different membrane than the amniotic membranes. It's a different thing. It's about the connection of the placenta to the uterus. I always think of people like Jim as having a really perfect membrane
Hmm.
that they can feel connection. They can get that energy through that. Jim, I might be full of shit. I don't even know. But they can get exchanges with people without letting it become them or define them or influence their own energetic balance. And
Hmm.
that is a huge gift. It's something really, really amazing.
Absolutely. And Jim, if you can bottle that shit, please do. Please, please do.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So really, Dahlia, I think that when people like you and me, when we're putting ourselves out there on the front line with other people's energy, it is so important. And even for the average person that's especially empathic, that you get those cleansings, even if you're self-cleansing, to just make sure that you're staying clean, practicing good spiritual hygiene, because when you're up close and personal with it, it really can affect you and it can change. It won't change who you are, but it can change how you manage your stress load, how you feel in your vulnerability with other people,
Absolutely.
and what you feel like you have to give to the world.
And it sounds like the first stage of cleansing is, like you said, working on that, semi-permeable layer that we all need,
Yes.
membrane. Huh.
And it's about what are you going to let in and what are you not going to let in. One of the things we learn in healing class is that if you shield, you can't get your energy out to somebody.
Right.
And so, as a healer, shielding is impractical because we want the full garden hose, fire hose effect of our healing and our ability to channel that divine energy to get to our client. And as soon as we start to shield to protect ourselves, we limit what we can also push out because the shield works both ways. And so, we're always at risk because we're taking one for the team. I mean, we're pushing that energy. And that's, again, why we have to be super careful about who are we surrounding ourselves with in our non-working time. If we're, and again, let's pull back from healers like myself and Dahlia. Let's look at social workers.
Mm.
Let's look at police officers, teachers, nurses, healers of on a more mundane level, anybody who is spending time with somebody on their worst day,
Mm.
anyone who is with people who are emotionally volatile is at risk and really needs to pay close attention to what their energy is doing. How do you feel when you leave that patient room? Do you suddenly feel heavier and uncomfortable? Do you feel more tired? Do you feel victimized? Do you feel violated?
Mm.
Prison guards, that's another one that just, boy, do they get slammed. So there's a lot of different professions out there that are super high risk. People who work with special needs and disabled clients. Sometimes you've got a lot of frustration going on there.
Right. Not only from having to manage the room, but your administration, there's so many more things other than just the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say anything
Yeah.
negative of the kids, but
It's true. And I think in hospital situations, doctor situation, nurse situations, special needs situations, one of your biggest challenges is the family of the people.
Ooh, yes.
That's a tough one. They're processing a lot of feelings, grief management, funeral management, so many types of careers out there that are high energetic risk, meaning that if you're participating in those careers, you need to take greater care. Another one we mentioned earlier in the broadcast, restaurant careers. People take their damn food very seriously.
Yes, they do.
And get really emotional about it because for some people, that's their crutch. That's what's holding them together, is the fact that tonight I can go into this restaurant, I can order this meal, and I'll feel better, I'll feel nurtured, I'll feel restored. And you get there and they're out of goddamn hollandaise sauce again. So breakdown. And so yeah, sometimes I've worked the restaurant industry and it's hard.
Is there emergency magic for that?
Nope. The emergency magic is you call me or Dahlia and you get Olympia.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So takeaways from all of this look like, a beautiful shift being witnessed in a festival of all places, but a beautiful shift being witnessed to say that there seems to be a public calling for more self-care and for taking care of the inner world before trying to influence the outer world. But even still, there are going to be instances where an emergency happens, resources have been exhausted. And so, in the attempts to try to influence an outcome, you can reach out to Katrina. You can try to get your hands on some magical correspondences and try to shift the tide. Ultimately, the best option if you're doing that is to have as much time as possible. So, really, an emergency could be considered at 2 months. We're about to have this thing and I need to get it done right now, et cetera, et cetera. And uh, if you are in a high risk job, high risk, high peopling job, you might need cleansing to keep the doors open periodically. And that could amount to an emergency session as well. So
I've got one of my favorite clients is a chiropractor in San Diego, and this dude's on speed dial. I mean, he's doing a lot of energy work with his practice, and he will message me and say, I just worked on somebody and I picked up something. Can you fit me in? And I'll move heaven and earth to get this guy in. And sure enough, there will be this big ass entity in there where, a week ago he had a clean egg. So, a lot of the emergency work that I do, and I think this is probably true for you, is other practitioners who have
yeah,
picked up something and need to get cleaned up before they move on to the next client.
yeah, your average Joe, really, it's pretty rare for me to get an average Joe practitioner, but I will get like other Reiki practitioners, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe they do another healing modality. So thank you for changing my mind on the whole emergency thing.
No, I still agree with you, honey.
Now that doesn't mean I that it will become available, right? Because like Katrina said, we are individuals with limited time. So Heidi, not the hollandaise sauce.
Not the hollandaise sauce. I
Well,
say that because 50 years ago,
oh, there's a
no,
story.
45 years ago, on the island of Guam, at the top of the rock NCO club, I had a woman have a total nervous breakdown because we didn't have hollandaise sauce for the eggs Benedict on the breakfast menu. So
Oh my,
it's stuck in my head.
first world problems.
Boy, she was sad. She was sad.
Well,
Lots
guys.
of, yeah.
Well, guys, we are at that time again. This conversation went by really quickly.
It did.
Um, but I think that having a handle on what an emergency looks like is very important. Thank you, Katrina, for bringing that to us today, because it also gave us some perspective on when we could start our magical work. I always wonder that with the candles that I buy from you, how early is too early? And it doesn't sound like that's a thing, and that's what I love,
Nope.
because logically I know that energy isn't hindered by distance and time, but when I have this practical candle in my hand, I'm like, okay, 7-day candle, all right, must be, it must need 7 days beforehand, but I could do, in fact, 14, two
You sure
months
can.
you
You
know
know what? One of the things I'm reminded of when I used to work with Celtic Cross and Tarot, the way that I read it was a little bit different than other people. I read on the cross part, the top card was what is forming right now and is about to come into being. And
Mm,
I read the right card as what is so far into manifestation that it is likely to happen. And
interesting.
I look at the world between that when I think of magic, of being, okay, this is a situation that's forming. So if I burn a candle for it now, I have a better chance of an outcome than once it's set in stone and it's happening.
I would say I'm close. So my top card is, should things continue as you expect, this is what you can
Mm-hmm.
look forward to or not, and then the near future. So, but I like the idea of using spell work to garner what's going on between those. And now I
Mm-hmm.
have between tarot cards.
Yeah. The liminal.
Right. So, with that, folks, we will see you next time, next week on Crossroads of Cognizance. Have a great night. Bye, everyone.